here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the guitarist and composer Robert Dean, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Was in the band Japan from the early years to about 80, 81, and then was in Vivabeat, who have had or have now got two albums that are coming out, one titled The House is Burning and the other The Party in the War Zone. So I'll put links to those in the notes below. Plus he's been in lots of other musical combos, including Sinéad O'Connor on the first album, and has collaborated and done bits and pieces elsewhere. But I'll put lots of links in the notes below, so you'll be able to click away and enjoy. But anyway, this is the conversation with Robert, who was in Costa Rica at the time. So generally the reception is good, though it does start to rain at one stage, but what the hell, it keeps it real. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject that was the early formative years. I know, it's a classic. Anyway, Robert, it's over to you.
Well, I was born in 55. So, I was aware when the Beatles started,
Yes.
And me, as a kid growing up, the Beatles were everywhere. You couldn't ignore them. Like you switch on the TV and the Beatles were there.
Yes.
It's a huge thing in the first part of the 60s, the first half of the 60s. It was such a huge thing that you had to sort of get caught up in it somehow, I didn't really buy any records until I was probably about 11, I guess, around
right.
that. So Revolver to this day is my favorite album of all time. I just think it's a masterpiece, really, and I just love the fact that they were being so creative. It was kind of a template for everything I've listened to since.
Yes, so. It's and yes, And Your Bird Can Sing is still quite a spine-tingling. Yes, I think there was 3 tracks on there which are all together. I remember recording it on my trusty TDK D90 cassette, and there was just some stunning, yes, And Your Bird Can Sing is just such a masterpiece. But then my brother was 7 years older, and he got Sergeant Pepper probably in about 73, 74, and I'd sneak into his room and play this album, and Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John, and I was mesmerised by that album, Sergeant Pepper.
I was an Elton John fan too in the 70s.
Yes, well,
I saw them live. I don't know how many times, 7 or 8 times in the 70s, I think.
Classic magic.
Yeah, it was a great time to be a fan of rock music. Really, the 70s was just.
It was quite awesome. So, what were you mentioned you were born in the East End of London. What was that like growing up in that area during that time in the 50s and 60s?
Well, it's funny. When you're growing up, it had this reputation of being kind of rough, but it never felt like that to me.
No.
Because I was quite comfortable walking around. I never felt in any way a victim or anything. So I didn't really even think about that.
Did your parents have any stories about the war period? Did they stay in London during the war?
Well, my dad was from Newcastle. My mum was from London. No, they didn't really talk about the war much.
No.
Yeah. And I never asked about it. I don't know.
There was no kind of sign of, bombs, craters.
Now you bring that up. It's like, why didn't we talk about that? But we didn't.
It was only 10 years. There would only been 10 years when you'd been born.
Yeah. I think maybe it was something they didn't want to talk about.
Yes. But there was, I
Even if-
suppose, the world of rationing had been very much part of it at that stage,
Yeah,
hadn't it?
yeah.
So,
It
yes, I
was,
do.
yeah, it was a difficult time, I guess, for, you know, growing up in England.
Did you have any older brothers or sisters who gave you any?
I have a sister. I have a sister who's 4 years older than me. Yeah.
Right. And did she have an influence on you?
She did, but her influences, like musically, were more. She was really into the Beach Boys
Right.
and to like Stax and soul.
Yes.
So, I love the Beach Boys. So I definitely got that from her. And some soul music's just it's kind of you just grow up with it. I mean, like Tamla Motown,
Yes.
was just was very vibrant, and you couldn't help but be caught up in it, really. But when I started seriously listening to music, then it was rock. I mean, it started with the Beatles, but then it was like I really loved Cream. Cream was like my band.
Right.
I just, I was a huge Eric Clapton fan, and just the whole power that they could create with a three-piece to me was very impressive.
What about the Hendrix experience?
I wasn't as much into Hendrix.
Right.
I thought he was sloppy. I mean, I get why people got excited by him, but to me, I preferred precision.
The precision of Eric compared to Jimi Hendrix, and then people then you had Pete Townsend. Did Townsend or Jeff Beck come into your consciousness at this stage?
I wasn't really a fan of Jeff Beck so much then. Since then, I've become hugely impressed with him. But The Who, certainly, yeah. I mean, I saw The Who 3 times in the 70s. And they were fantastic live, with the original.
Yes.
Not doing so well now, but...
Yes, a bit like an old married couple, really, aren't they?
Really. But yeah, and Jethro Tull, they were the first... Well, actually, the first band I saw live was Blind Faith in Hyde Park.
Oh, brilliant.
69, I think. So I was like 14.
Who else was on the bill?
Who else was on the bill? Donovan.
Fantastic.
Was it? I'm thinking Richie Havens, but maybe not. I'm not sure.
Right, blind. So
Anyway,
Hyde Park was the place.
Huh?
So Hyde Park was the place that you saw your first gig.
My first gig, and then pretty soon after that, I saw Jethro Tull at the Albert Hall. I had a very fortunate opportunity, really, because my sister worked for a solicitor's. She was a secretary, and they had 2 seats in the Albert Hall for every show. They like had some sort of, they bought those seats.
Yes.
And none of the staff were interested in rock music. So my sister would get the tickets and give them to me. So I'd go and see everybody.
Crikey, that is, God, you lucked out on that one, didn't you?
Great, and they were like the same seats, and they were like just raised up from the the bottom part, like the auditorium part. So they were perfect seats.
Perfect. Corporate seating, I guess.
Yeah, so I just me and my best man.
And Ian Anderson at that stage was very enigmatic, because I loved those early albums like Stand Up, Benefit, Minstrel in the Gallery. I mean, they were just such classic songs.
Yeah. I mean, this was around the time of Stand Up. And, as a young boy, it just blew me away. I mean,
yes.
I just thought they were the second coming, really. I mean, I just thought they were amazing. And, I remained a Jethro Tull fan for a while, but I when it got to the 70s, I got more caught up in like glam rock and stuff like that, and bands like Sparks and T-Rex and, stuff like that.
Yes, well, I guess that was one gets a little bit caught up with the fashionable zeitgeist, really, at that point.
Yeah, early Roxy music. I was a huge Roxy music fan.
Yes, but I always remember I did an interview with Ian Anderson, and I was always curious. I mean, he was very forthcoming, but I was always curious how David Bowie got to play on a Steel Eye Span track, which was "To Know Him Is to Love Him," which was a Phil Spector song, and it was like Ian Anderson just knew that he was producing that record and knew that Bowie, he needed a saxophone player and knew that Bowie knew a bit. So he just asked David along and said, could you do it for me? And he just turned up, done his bit and went off. And then decades later saw him and reminded him, and they had a little joke that David never got any fee for it, but they just laughed it off as showbiz people do. But yes, he sounded like a decent chap in all ways. And I couldn't believe how big they were in America, actually. They were absolutely massive, but they tore their little socks off.
I mean, a lot of those bands, particularly in the early 70s, I think, they toured so extensively in the States, that they covered as many. But I mean, it's how Led Zeppelin became enormous, was basically because they just toured their socks off. I mean, they just went for it.
Yes, and they put the work in.
Yeah, and the same with Jethro Tull and many others.
Yes, it's all. So when you got to that ripe age of 16, leaving school, at that stage, did you leave with any O levels or GCSEs, or did you stay on the?
Yeah, I had some O levels, and I did A levels too.
Right, so you stuck it through into the 70s, actually.
I did art and English.
Right. And did it feel, I mean, the 60s kind of ends on this downer, doesn't it? The Beatles break up, you suddenly get the death of Hendrix, Morrison, Joplin, Brian Jones had died. The Charles Manson thing had sort of ripped a certain sort of image from that lovely, holistic Laurel Canyon vibe and Haight Ashbury. How did you feel going into the 70s with such a different, kind of soundtrack, because obviously a lot of those bands had sort of been and gone, and from the 60s.
In the very early 70s, I was very much into that sort of acoustic folk singer thing.
Right. What, Joan Baez and Joni Mitchell?
Yeah, I'm still a huge Joni Mitchell fan. I'm still a huge Neil Young fan. Dylan, I absolutely adore. And, at the time, it was James Taylor, Carole King, all these people.
God, you wanted to be in Laurel Canyon, didn't you?
Pretty much, yeah. I loved Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I just thought they were amazing. So, yeah, I was really into that. But I was also into, like, English folk, too. John Martin.
Did you, what about Davy Graham, Angie?
That's a little earlier.
Right. Did you ever play it? Did you ever manage to master that one?
No, I didn't.
What about Bert Yance?
Yeah. I saw Pentangle, but I wasn't really into his playing. Richard Thompson was a big influence on me at that time.
Fairport Convention?
Yeah, I love Fairport Convention. I mean, Legion Leaf is a masterpiece of folk rock, I think. But I was really into that. I was also into Steel Eye Span too. I saw them several times.
Stunning. I love Steel Eye Span.
Yeah. Yeah, they were a lot of fun too,
Amazing band. Maddie is just stunning, and I love that Englishness and that kind of those stories that they evoked as well. Yes, again another person I was fortunate to interview, because they were quite a soundtrack to my 70s. That band, and I know people laugh, but I love those bands like Renaissance as well.
Well, I like the first Renaissance, which was almost a totally different band. There were Renaissance to begin with Keith Relf from the Yardbirds.
Yes.
and Jane Ralph, his sister, who was singing, and I can't remember the other members, but they did one album, and I loved that album, absolutely love it. But I didn't really, once it became something very different, I think, and I wasn't really into the later, you know, incarnation of it so much.
Yes.
But, you know, at that time, it's everything which was signed to Island Records seemed to be like, it was really good. It was weird, but it was like literally you could buy any Island Records album and you'd find something to like on it. And
Was
Renee,
Bridget St. John on Island Records?
no, she was on John Peel's label.
Dandelion.
Yeah, she was on that.
Right. I just remember.
On that. But, you know, around that time, I was fortunate enough to see Nick Drake live.
Oh my God, Nick Drake! You've seen Nick Drake live, all of you and 20 people probably.
He supported Fotheringay at the Festival Hall.
And were you a fan before you saw him?
Well, only through, like, you know, there were some island samplers, and he was on all these island samplers. So I was certainly familiar with his music then, yeah. And I had the first album, 5 Leaves Left.
Stunning.
But yeah, I mean, I can actually say I saw Nick Drake.
Well, I've spoke to lots of people who've been to Woodstock and seen this band and that band, but no one's ever seen Nick Drake. Though I did do an interview with one of those session trumpet players who once recorded on a Nick Drake record, which I can't remember his name, but he was one of these people whose CV was just boggling, and you know, he just got called into the studio by Joe Boy to say, "Could you do a bit of something on this record with Nick?" I don't even think he met him at the time, actually. So, yes, it's an interesting one. So, when did you find yourself playing a guitar? When did you want to start to play music?
I seriously started playing when I was about 15. So I was still at school, you know, and I mean, I had a guitar when I was about 11, but I didn't even know how to tune the thing, you know. So obviously the timing wasn't right.
Yes.
But yeah, probably around 15, I decided that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to play guitar.
Right.
So that was all I wanted to do from that point on, you know. And so when I left school, I knew I wanted to be a musician. And so I just basically got a job so I could buy equipment so I could be a musician.
That's such a sort of amazing thing, isn't it? Thinking back, because the 70s didn't have a lot of amazing amount of opportunity. There wasn't an amazing amount of money sloshing around and people having great dreams. I mean, I suppose, at that stage, we were hooked on things like Top of the Pops and that certain stardom, but it did still seem like another world being in a band. And then you also had the heavy bands like, you know, Deep Purple and Black Sabbath, then prog bands started to come along, and that seemed like another world, like Yes and Genesis and Wishbone Ash. And then obviously glam, which just seemed like otherworldly. I mean, you had the Bowie on one level, and then you had, you know, the Glitter Band on another, and Sweet. So it was a little bit strange, wasn't it? So where were you sort of finding your musical kind of area at this stage? Because obviously folk music is very much a bit of another layer, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't really know how it evolved. I think maybe T-Rex was the connection, because
Right.
They were Tyrannosaurus Rex were an acoustic duo.
Incredible, yes.
I was into, you know, and then, you know, Mark Bolan went electric, and I was still into that. And so that might have been the connection for me, you know, like the bridge.
Yes. And it's interesting because I think
totally glam, you know.
Well, he did sort of, when you went back to his solo records and his incredible lyric quality in those kind of 60s period, and listen to John Peel introducing him on the Perfume Garden. You know, he was quite, he had a very mystical quality to him.
Yeah.
And lyrically, it was kind of otherworldly. It felt like deep and meaningful, but we didn't really know what he was going on about. But it seemed very important to
Right.
nod along, really, at that stage.
And then, of course, Elton John became glam rock too. You know?
Yes, but they had those lyrics that had been written for him by Bernie, which again there was those records on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road where he talks about Roy Rogers and Candle in the Wind. So he was a very good storyteller, and I guess with your interest in sort of the folk singers as well, there was a sort of a narrative, or with Joni Mitchell, there's that emotional depth and relationship thing going on. Especially with those albums like Blue and Caught and Spark and Hujara, which were
masterpiece.
Yes, I know. I think Black Crow is my favourite track on there.
Really, I think Amelia's mine.
And was it Ferris Sings the Blues?
Furry Sings the Blues.
Yes. I know when she does her spoken word. So what was the first kind of, did you get a musical band lined up in your sort of sixth form days? Did you did you have
we played at school, we had our own little band. We never played anywhere. We basically played in my friend's living room, we just jammed like forever, I mean, we just never stopped really. And we had all these tapes, and they'd be like half-hour jams that we thought were brilliant, but nobody else would.
Yes.
But that's how it started. And then I started like answering ads in Melody Maker and stuff.
Oh, was it the classic one? So which one did you answer? Which kind of advert sort of came to your sort of attention at this stage?
Well, it was, I mean, there was a couple of bands which didn't really go anywhere, that I just kind of like hooked up with, which didn't work for some reason or another, and I just kept pressing it. I didn't go to that many like interviews, whatever.
I was going to say, did you start to sort of get a little bit of being in London, did you start to get a sort of hint that things were changing musically with people like Doctors of Madness and Dr. Feelgood and a certain slight early punk period coming through?
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't help but be, influenced by it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the scene, and it just kept evolving and changing.
Yes.
I wasn't really into, I mean, I bought the Sex Pistols singles, but I never saw them live. I was always still more, I mean, to me, like the more interesting side of punk for me was, like the Buzzcocks and Magazine, which weren't really punk anyway, and Elvis Costello, which was sort of on that bandwagon.
Yes.
Sure. So sort of into that sort of stuff more, really,
yes.
The out-and-out punk bands. But I bought a load of the things, I bought like advert singles. I mean, everybody bought singles at that time. I mean, that was the thing. The punk thing was like putting out X-Ray Specs where they were friends of ours. The guitarist went to school with in Japan.
Right. And did you meet Laura Logic?
No.
She was a saxophone player.
No.
She was in X-Ray Specs. But
yeah.
Laura Logic, yes. Well, she's just been sort of, she had a few, she's sort of started to re-emerge from the sort of, the woodwork in a certain way. So with Japan then, when that band got together, did you feel that this was a altogether different vibe that you hadn't experienced before?
Yeah, I mean, when I, They were based in South London. I was based in East London. I, d- I can't even remember how I got like my guitar and my amp on the tube, I mean, and then got the mainline station to Lewisham. I don't even know how I did it really. But yeah, I mean, when we first met up, it felt like it was a band. They had their own PA.
Right.
PA. They were serious enough to have, to have their own PA, and they wrote their own songs. David wrote at that point he was writing, 10 songs a day or something. I mean, most of them, weren't worth listening to, but it was clear to me that there was something going on.
Yes.
It was something that
And were you the final piece of the jigsaw to fit this puzzle?
yeah, I mean, they all went to school together, and when I auditioned, I think I was 23 and David and and Richard were 21 and Steve was like 17 or something. I mean, he was basically still at school, although he wasn't really going to school. Um, but yeah, I mean, as soon as I got involved and we started playing gigs and stuff, and then we decided we needed a manager, and then I think we, again, in Melody Maker, I think we advertised for a manager.
Yes. And you got you got a famous manager as well, didn't you?
We got Simon Napier Bell, yeah.
I know. Actually, I did an interview with him once, actually. I got his book and we had a little chat about life and stuff. He's been around, hasn't he? The old Simon. Was it
a pinch of salt.
Pardon?
Take it all with a pinch of salt.
Yes, quite. Yes. But that must have felt like a very grown-up, being in part of a grown-up world suddenly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we thought, this is it. We're going to do it.
Yes.
We're going to work. We felt that it was going to work. I mean, we were gigging a lot and we weren't playing to many people and, whatever. I mean, we were just doing what bands do. But over time, actually, it wasn't that much time when you think about it. But yeah, I mean, and then we got a record deal, and then as soon as you get a record deal, you think, well, that's it, we're made.
It's all going to be easy street after that, isn't it, really? Did you find an audience quite quickly? Did you suddenly find yourself looking out thinking, these are our people, this is it?
Not really, not in England. I mean, we were doing, the thing is, the thing you've got to understand is that we weren't a punk band and everybody else was. Like, if you were gigging, we were like the only ones that weren't a punk band. Our influences were considerably different. I mean, you couldn't help but be influenced by it to a certain extent, but we really were something not quite in tune with what was going on.
Yes.
So, so we were treated with a lot of indifference, really. I mean, people come to the gigs and whatever, but early on we weren't really playing to, large crowds. Simon would get us on some tours and stuff. We did a college tour supporting Jim Capaldi.
I mean,
which went fine. I mean, it was fine. I mean, we got on okay, and we do like supports with. We do horrible, like college support or university supports of the Damned and stuff, and things that didn't really work for us.
No, you must have got bottled off nearly.
Well, we did. I mean, like Mick got a half brick in his head at one of those shows, and I got like somebody threw a lit cigarette and it went in my hair and started
Smouldering.
onto my hair, you know. But the one thing I am grateful for is they weren't spitting at us.
Yes, that was disgusting.
They spat at the damned, you know, because that's what punks did. But they didn't do it to us. I mean, you know, we'd watch the damned at the side of the stage and it would be like dripping off them, you know, like it's just hard to describe, really.
No, it would have been.
It's like raining spit, you know.
Yes, there are those.
Glad that we didn't have that rapport with the audience.
No. What was it like then, sort of doing the second album? Because often, if the first one's been a bit muted, so to speak, is there much enthusiasm for the follow-up? Is there a bit of self-doubt and existential crisis going on, or was there quite a lot of enthusiasm?
I don't think there was within us. I think we were pretty certain that we were moving forward. I don't think Hans or our record label, who were German, I don't think they knew what to do with us, really. I don't think they had an idea, really.
No.
But they still let us do it, you know. I mean, we were still finding ourselves too. But I mean, you know, in the early days of our record contract, they had us, you know, doing overtly pop, you know, stuff with like they put orchestras on it and stuff. I mean, it was, you know, it just wasn't us at all. But eventually the first album was it was kind of a compromise, really. It was what we had in our live set, plus what the sort of stuff we were listening to was influencing, you know. So there's like this mishmash of styles, really, in the first album. But it was a case of just getting some stuff down and releasing it, you know.
Yes.
And then the second album was more in tune with what we were doing.
Yes, it's a bit more. But by the third album, did you start to have more of an audience by this stage and sort of?
The good thing about you know the trajectory of the band was that the country Japan discovered us,
Right.
and so we were literally on the cover of all these glossy Japanese magazines, you know, and we were able to tour Japan and play 2 nights at the Budokan, sold out, you know, when at home we were playing the Marquee Club.
Yes.
And we were literally like, it was like Beatlemania. I mean, you know, you'd get off the airplane and there'd be screaming girls, and you couldn't leave your hotel by the main door. You had to go round the back because there's all these girls in the foyer, and you know, we had bodyguards and everything. I mean, it was nuts. It was completely nuts.
Yes, it must have set you all a little bit strange.
But the good thing was that it gave us the possibility to finance ourselves back home. You know, like touring Japan for a couple of weeks in very large venues to sold out crowds was we were able to keep going, you know.
Yes. And what was the sort of the creative process like? Did you sort of have a particular style of coming together, recording or jamming stuff or rehearsing stuff?
We had our own rehearsal space around that time, and we would just go in there and you know, rehearse for hours and hours and hours a day, and come up with stuff.
Yes. Did you start to feel that by the third album things were starting to seem a lot more coherent with with the
yeah. I think we had more of an idea of what we wanted to do, and David was always coming in with different songs, new songs and stuff, and we just work on them.
Yes. And did you feel that as we approach the end of the 70s, the great 79, Thatcher gets in, and then, obviously, I always feel that a decade has a certain quality to it, and the 80s comes along, we had the Falkland War, the miners' strike, Greenham Common. Did that have any kind of impact on how you were feeling kind of individually or collectively? And, with that next wave of new romantic kids coming along as well, and electronic music and different technology happening as well.
I think it was just a period of a lot more positivity about what we were doing. So you didn't even think about like the political, side of things really. I mean, at the best of times, London was a struggle, but you sort of we were just able to get on with it and just do what we had to do, and that was the focus. It's like we were blinkered really.
Yes,
everything else was kind of peripheral.
And was the Hansel contract, was that up after 3 albums?
Yes, well, I'm not sure it was up, but I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but I think that Virgin were interested in us and bought us out of the contract.
Right.
I think that's how it worked, and Virgin was probably more in keeping with where we wanted to be.
Yes, and there seemed to be a bit of a movement started to appear, didn't they, in the London scene as well, and across the country, and the art college, student market started to develop, and people started to embrace a certain different vibe. I just wondered if you found your audience was starting to change as well at this stage.
Oh, it definitely was, yeah, for sure. It was still a struggle for a little while. We did that single with Giorgio Moroder, which was a distinctly different style to what we'd done before. But that was kind of the turning point, I think, and it was sort of, the beginning of the new romantic movement. And
yes.
Blitz Club and all that stuff, which we weren't really a part of, to be honest.
No.
But it was certainly like a forerunner of that. I mean, I think the key band that kind of showed us the way was Ultravox, like the John Fox version of Ultravox.
Right.
They were very much influenced by their trajectory, I think. And it kind of helped us find ours.
Yes. Yes, I think they're definitely, I think at that stage, I was still, I don't know, still felt a bit, I was still finding my musical sort of tribe, I suppose, at that stage in life. I was not even 16, so I was still, I grew up in East Anglia. It was very heavy metal and status quo. Punk hadn't even hit these waters by then. You could imagine, couldn't you? It was still a little bit of a backwater, but, things were creeping through. You could tell, I think when you started getting ABC and the Soft Cell getting into the charts and people like that, things started to alter really. And yeah, and had your
again, it became unavoidable, right? For you growing up, it was probably unavoidable. All that electro pop was just everywhere.
It was in the top 20.
Yeah.
Radio 1 loved it, didn't they, actually? And did your guitar playing change much at this stage? Had you, because you were still very young at this point, had you sort of become influenced by other people? Had you started to...
I was very influenced by Fred, I mean, the stuff he did with Bowie, mind blowing, really. And I was very influenced by the simplicity of what he did during that time. It wasn't really very technically intricate. I mean, a lot of Fripp's playing is technically intricate with King Crimson, but he didn't really apply that to his stuff with Bowie or even with Peter Gabriel. Really, it was. I mean, it came directly from his ambient stuff with Eno, and I think,
Yes.
and evolved from that. So that was a very big influence on my playing. I've always been a player who is most interesting in contributing to a song without being the main focus, particularly.
Yes.
Like an integral part, but not, like in your face.
Showboating.
I mean, that goes right back to George Harrison, as far as I'm concerned. He played melodically for the song, and I think
Yes.
I've always respected players that do that, rather than go off on a tangent and just go wild.
Yes.
You know.
And what? And when you went,
there is a place for that, but I'm very much interested in the development of the pop song and what you can do within that framework.
yes,
That's the most important thing.
yes,
3-minute song or the 4-minute song, just creating these mini masterpiece things, that's kind of what I'm into.
do you ever sort of lay awake at night, sort of wondering what it is that makes a chord progression or melody so memorable decades later, and why all these other ones are not ever going to be memorable, and we don't remember, certain riffs, certain, like I said, chord progressions, you think, God, yes, you can only hear, and then you go, oh yeah, that's that song. Do you ever sort of wonder what it is that makes something,
Well, I mean, I'm sort of in awe of some of the subtleties that can be created within a pop song, I mean, like stuff like Steely Dan. I mean, they can do a song, it can have 40 chords in it, but it still sounds like a pop song. How the hell can you do that?
yes.
I mean, that is masterful. Unfortunately, I think that side of pop music is kind of dead. The subtle creativity is not really there anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yes, the good old Steely Dan. We loved them so much, didn't we? And when you sort of come to do your fourth album,
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
Mhm.
were you feeling like at this point the band were absolutely solid, feeling like the creative force was kind of going well?
Well, the problem with the fourth album was that David was very much in control of it. He like had a very distinct vision, I suppose you'd say, and it kind of sidelined me a bit. So I wasn't feeling as comfortable with my contributions as I had up to that point. So that's why I'm not on all the tracks, really. I mean, there's stuff that I just felt, well, I don't think I can contribute to it. I don't think I can, like the song "My New Career." I don't know if you know it, but I mean, it was recorded and created in the studio. But I just felt that there was nothing I could put on it. And that's generally what I would do if I didn't feel that I was adding anything, then I would rather not play on it.
Yes.
And so that was my feeling around that time, really. And partly the recording of the album Quiet Life, the one before it, had been such a joyous occasion for everybody. We were all on a really great level, creatively and mentally, and I think it was quite clear when we did Gentlemen Take Polaroids that we'd passed that.
Yes.
It had got a bit more serious and not quite so much fun.
I guess in hindsight, you kind of can see these kind of story arcs with most bands.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So, to me, it wasn't a great time, really. But there's some good stuff came out of it, so that's the main thing.
Yes, blimey. So then, and that was the end of that chapter. Then how did what happens next after being? I remember doing an interview with Fast Eddie from Motorhead, and you think, God, you were in Motorhead. You did those 3 classic albums, and then you have you sort of walk away. You get slightly pushed out, all sorts of things. It's not great. What happens next? I mean, it's always tricky. How do you navigate the next bit?
My instinct was to go to the States. I'd made friends like Marina, who was in Vivabeat. She had become a friend. She worked for Hansa, for Ariola Hansa,
Right.
in the States, which is how we met. And so whenever we were in the States, like, we would get together and hang out and whatever, and she'd come to London, and so there was a friendship there, and so I was very much keen on the idea of leaving England and living in the States, at least for a while. So that was my plan, really.
Yes.
And then Marina said, "Well, would you like to play in Vivabeat?" I'm like, "Yeah, why not?"
God, hurrah for LA.
Opportunity to live in LA and hang out and find out what living in another country is like.
Yes, that was fantastic. God, that was such a lucky kind of step, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You
Well,
could move.
unfortunately, I mean, as a band, the band was great, but the problem was that they didn't have a record deal. We were playing quite a lot of gigs. We invariably any British, like pop act, electro pop act that came into LA, we ended up supporting. I mean, supporting like everybody, Depeche Mode, Gang of Four. I can't remember who else. B-52s.
Right.
Loads of people. REM. But I mean, we did the Human League's West Coast gigs. We did all their West Coast gigs when they played.
Yes.
After Dare, when Dare was released, we did all that.
My God.
We played to a lot of people and we had fun in that, but we never got a record contract at that point.
That must have been so frustrating.
It was a bit. But, I was still having a good time. I loved living in LA. I really did. It was kind of a breath of fresh air, and I think it was something I needed at the time.
Well, it was probably quite nice after the experience with the band and that 5 years to have a change of landscape as well.
Totally different. Living in the Hollywood Hills, it was beautiful every day.
I would imagine that was quite a joy, really. And then did you, at that stage, had you sort of, because you've got these reissues, haven't you, that are coming out?
Yeah.
So there's a best of, isn't there?
Yeah, you probably know more about them than I do. I'm not that well, roast on them, but yes, there is a best of, which is just coming out. It's not out yet, right?
Yes, that's coming out, the best of, from 1979 to 1986, featuring 3 previously unreleased tracks. So did you go in the studio with the band?
Yeah. We recorded with a guy called Earl Mankey.
Yes.
Arcs. Yeah, we recorded some stuff with Earl Mankey at that time. I mean, basically doing demos to, shop around to record companies.
Right.
But nothing really happened at that point. And then we were still like gigging and stuff, but it was around that time that I bumped into Gary Numan in LA, and I knew him. I'd already recorded one track with him in 80, I guess, 1980.
Yes.
Dance album. And he also came on tour with Japan, that's another story, but it was weird. He was like on our tour bus, but none of us knew he was coming. Anyway, and I bumped into him in LA, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Do you want to be in my band?"
And you went, yeah, okay, Gary, that sounds like...
Yeah, well, we can, talk about it. He said, "Okay, come over for dinner." He was renting a house in Hollywood Hills. And he said, "Come over for dinner and I can talk you through it and whatever." And, the plan was to do this tour. And so I said, yes.
Let's do it.
It was money, and it was a chance to play some of and see parts of America that I hadn't seen yet. And so I agreed to do that. And it was a very good band. I mean, Pino Palladino was the bass player. Chris Slade was the drummer. Roger Mason was the keyboard player, who I didn't know, but he's well known in Australia. And we became very good friends over that tour, and we started working together and playing together and stuff. But the tour was a failure.
Right.
It was sort of the wrong time for Gary, really.
Was that because it was all kind of, rather than wax, and was it waning a bit, his career at this stage?
Waning a bit, yeah. And I think it was more an experiment than anything else, wondering if he could do that. But it was a fairly large production show, but in a lot of places we weren't playing much bigger than clubs.
Right.
And if we were playing in bigger places, well, then they were half full, So it was a good experience. It was fun, had a good time doing it. It was a bit crazy. Wall of Voodoo were our support on that tour.
Oh my God, I love the Wall of Voodoo.
Yeah, well, they were friends of mine from LA anyway, so we hung out together all the time anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I love Wall of Voodoo too.
God, that is, it's Mexican radio.
Yeah.
Cool Box 123, classic records, weren't they?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
They were...
So anyway, it was a fun tour, but for Gary, it wasn't a successful one.
No, I'd imagine he had a lot to think about for his next move, really.
Yeah. There were lots of problems on that tour, like the bus broke down, like on the second day of the, we just, oh, well, no, actually the first thing was that the first gig was Perkins Palace in Pasadena, which was a theatre fairly large theatre.
Yes.
And we worked out to actually rehearse in it for like 3 days prior to that first gig. And the Tube came over to film stuff during that rehearsal period. No, in fact, the first day,
Yes.
first show, and something went wrong with like the power supply. Like they overloaded the power with all their equipment or something. I'm not sure what happened, but the gig was an absolute disaster. The sound was all over the place and everything, even though we'd practiced in it for 3 days. It was a complete and utter mess. So it started off on the wrong foot, and then the bus broke down, and then, there were just several other things that happened.
Yes.
It wasn't a successful tour, but I still enjoyed it. And,
Well, it's good to try and find those positives, isn't it, at that stage? So once the album was done and the tour, then how do you sort of navigate the next little section?
Well, then I went back to LA again, and Roger from Gary's band, he came back to LA too, and we kind of settled down and started writing together and stuff for a while. But he eventually went back to England, and I decided at that point to go back to England too, so that we could continue working on material and stuff. And so we three of us, his friend from Australia and the two of us, we shared a flat in London, and we would just like work on stuff overnight. I mean, we'd like record all night, every night. It was a very intense period, but very productive. Unfortunately, we never did anything with it, but because what happened was that the Illustrated Man project came up, and that was basically someone that Roger knew from Australia had moved to England. He had some songs, and we recorded some demos, and EMI signed us those demos. And so we decided we needed another drummer, so I got Hugo Burnham from Gang of Four involved, who I'd met in LA. And then, we started working on that. And we recorded an album, which was never released. The only thing that was released at that time was an EP in the US, a 12-inch, like 6-track EP. And that's the only thing we did. But we did tour. We toured in the UK with Nick Kershaw. We played a gig at the Lyceum with Cyndi Lauper. We did all this stuff. And then we did our own tour of the clubs in the States after that.
What, like Danceteria or band?
Like Paradise in Boston,
Right.
Pretty good places. We did, was it the Palladium in LA, I think? I think, what did we play in New York? Hurrahs, I think.
Oh, yes. Got you. Yes. So this was Illustrated Man, but you were on Capitol. You released a sort of
Yeah, it was Parlophone in the UK and Capitol in the States.
Right, but you did get one release done.
Yeah. And we released two singles, I think.
Right, at this stage. And then why did that project not take off?
Well, when we were doing the American tour stuff, I think by that time, Roger and I in particular, I think we'd sort of like lost interest in the project.
Right.
Like it hadn't really, it wasn't really taking off, and I don't think we really felt that it was the way we wanted to be. So we decided to leave.
Just leave that project. And at that stage, had Vivabeat finished as well?
No, well, they had another incarnation when I left them. They had another guitarist, and I think they changed a couple of
Right.
others. And they were still recording and gigging. And then after that Illustrated Man American tour, I went back to LA, and I moved to LA again for a while. And during that time, we were working on stuff, music, which was, at that point, it was still classed as Vivabeat, although it wasn't really, because the main focus was 3 girl singers. It had changed.
Was Marina still involved?
Yes. Marina was one of the girls, and we recorded a few songs, but they're on the best of. I think some of those tracks are on the best of.
Yes, I have to say, there's been a lot of the members of that band have died, haven't they?
Yes,
which must be quite horrendous, actually, to sort of see. And so many died quite early in the 80s.
There's actually 4 of them that died from the first incarnation. Terence, the singer, was still the singer when I was in the band. But yeah, basically 4 from that original incarnation died. The only ones left were Mick and Marina.
Right.
Who were a married couple during that.
Right. And is Marina still alive?
Oh, yeah.
Right, okay. I was just trying to, just working out. I couldn't...
Yeah, I mean, they're still around. And, they're the instigators of the interest at the moment.
Yes, well, absolutely.
Friends, and we still communicate, like we are now.
Yes, well, absolutely. Who isn't? That's what I say. Yeah. Who isn't? So then, as the sort of the 80s is progressing, and obviously you're sort of going from LA to London. I mean, the music scene in the UK has changed quite a bit as well. I mean, not radically, but we suddenly had the wonderful world that was indie pop. 83, the Smiths appeared. There was all that. It's the C86 world, let's face it, jingly jangly songs from the people like the Wedding Presents and June Brides and, Mighty Lemon Drops, all that. Did that sort of enter your consciousness at any stage?
Not really the indie stuff, no. I was more of the, I liked like Tears for Fears and Talk and
right.
Stuff. Peter Gabriel still, at that point. The Blue Nile.
Blue Nile. Quite a sophisticated taste, haven't you, on this front?
Well, I guess, yeah, it stems from, Steely Dan, Joni Mitchell,
Polished production. You love your polished production, don't you?
I like my polished production.
Do you feel, though, I mean, when I hear the say talk, and I feel like it's a little bit overproduced. I do feel somehow that's kind of like could be remixed a bit with a bit more.
The later stuff, like Spirit of Eden, and
I just that very electronic drum sound, that sort of heavy kind of.
But they moved away from that by the 3rd album.
Yeah, there was just there was that Trevor Horn production that started to sort of filter over everything, didn't it? Which
it wasn't really them though. I mean, they started off, like their first couple of albums were sort of in the shadow of Duran Duran kind of thing, but way more interesting, in my opinion. And then they became something, they evolved into something very experimental and interesting. You know,
Yes.
I mean, you should listen to those later albums.
Oh, I'll have to. I think I was just a little.
Not overproduced. It's almost like freeform jazz. You know, it's like Miles Davis.
Right. Oh, I will go back with fresh ears, actually. I suppose I quite like more of an earthy, organic sound, something a little bit.
What they got into.
Right. Okay. Well, I'd slightly put them into a bracket, haven't I? I need to. I will go back and have a little listen. I was a little bit. I was a bit of an uptight '80s indie kid, and was all into the kind of the red wedge movement and political, socialism and all that kind of jazz. A little bit Billy Redskins, bands like that, and I sort of needed that. And whereas that kind of when you heard, and I suppose it was it Robin Miller who brought in Sade, that sound, that kind of production sound, and then, like I mentioned, Trevor Horn, and that became a thing, didn't it? And suddenly, I mean, those two Bowie albums in the '80s, Tonight and Never Let Me Down, again, I think suffer from really bad production.
Really do. They really do. Well, his songs weren't that great either. I mean,
No.
Loving is a fantastic song. He shouldn't have done those Iggy covers.
No.
You can't do them any better than what Iggy did.
No. He always picked bad covers.
Huh?
He always picked quite dubious cover versions to sing.
God only knows it's terrible.
Oh yeah, that's one of the that should have been consigned to the
I think for the '80s in general, Bowie was kind of confused.
He was very confused, and I loved him intensely. And I find it fascinating listening to those albums with his light reggae vibe and odd sort of sounds, which are sort of like, how do you pull yourself out of that? It's like being in a relegation battle, isn't it?
I think essentially it was another persona, going on from Ziggy and the Thin White Duke and whatever the persona was during, the Low Heroes Lodger period.
Mm-hmm.
Another persona, but it was one which it may have been his most successful, but it wasn't his most satisfying.
No.
Far from it. I mean,
I do find that a lot of artists who have their moment in one decade, the following period stroke decade is often a little bit odd, if not terrible. And then if they can then pull themselves out. I mean, there was quite a lot of people who
keep it, fresh and interesting.
Yes. I think from going from sort of creating what they feel they want to create, they suddenly start looking at what the kind of the marketplace is doing, or what the kind of charts is, or what the latest hit, producer, the hot producer, or the hot new guitarist, and they think, oh, we might get that for our next record, or we'll get him to guest on this new album, and it's like, oh, I'm not quite sure about that, David. So, it's quite.
You need to overthink it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we had Tin Machine, so that brought that to a full stop, didn't it? The Sal's Brothers.
I'm not really a fan of Tin Machine, because I feel it's like another persona, but I don't quite buy it.
No, Me and the Lads, the band.
I don't quite buy that.
No, but then but yourself then, what's your next kind of musical moment? We straddle the kind of '80s. We've got this now period of the late '80s of the ecstasy world, the dance world. Then we have grunge coming along. How do you as an artist then find your path in this?
Well, I was working. Well, I did a tour with a guy called Simon F. Who was supporting King on a tour, and he just released an album on Chrysalis, and I did a tour with him of the UK. And then I got to know this guy who lived in the West Country, David Luckhurst, and he had a project called Crazy House. And they got signed to Chrysalis, and he asked me to get involved with that. So I moved to the West Country and worked on stuff with that project. It was one winter. It was a whole winter, I think, in the West Country. It was horrible. It's probably my most miserable time.
Yes.
In the music business. I wasn't enjoying it. I wasn't particularly enjoying working with that band. But the weird thing, things happen for a reason. What happened was, weirdly, I bumped into the bass player from the Psychedelic Furs, who I knew not well, but I knew him in LA. We chat in LA. I mean, I knew the Furs, I knew their manager, and we would hang out a bit, And he invited me to his wedding, which was next weekend or something in the West Country. And I was asked if I'd like to tour with the Psychedelic Furs. And I said, well, I can't really, because I'm sort of committed to this other project, Crazy House,
Mm.
Well, I wasn't really happy doing it, but at that point, I didn't feel that touring with the Psychedelic Furs was something I wanted to do. So I turned it down. And then I went back to London. I used to go back to London at the weekends just to get away from the West Country. And a friend of mine was working with this Irish singer doing demos. And he played me his demos, which was Sinead's early demos.
Right.
And I said, well, I just love this. I said, I would love to be involved, because it was kind of a connection to the folk music which I'd left behind,
Yes.
There was a lot of that in it. And I just felt it was something I'd really like to get involved in. And I said, if you need a guitar player, I would be very interested in doing this. He said, well, we have a guitar player at the moment, but if anything happens, I'll let you know. And then I don't think it was even a week later, he called me up and said, the guitarist got offered a gig playing guitar for the Psychedelic Furs. So if you want, the gig's yours. So I dropped Crazy House and I went back to London and I started working with Sinead.
Blimey, that's amazing. Was Marco Peroni, was he part of that?
Not at all. Yeah.
Pardon?
In fact, that was after me. What happened was the band was put together and we rehearsed solidly for, I want to say, almost a year. She was very young,
Yes.
And so, yeah, I mean, we would just, rent a studio space for months on end and go in and if it wasn't happening that day, we'd come the next day and we just worked pretty solidly for about a year, I think, on stuff. She was signed to Ensign Records, which was through Chrysalis, I think.
Yes.
And they just wanted to develop what she had, and so I was, heavily involved with that. We did lots of demos and stuff. And then it was decided time to do the album. And we had this guy, Mick Glossop, producing, who'd done the Water Boys and Van Morrison. And so we went in the studios and started recording The Lion and the Cobra. We finished the entire album, and then Ensign took the tapes to various producers to see about remixing songs. And they all came back and said that it was not possible to remix it. There were no time codes on it.
Right.
It was all done live in the studio. And so it was decided to shelve that and re-record the album in a more controlled space. It was very much a band album the first time. So it was done a lot more economically. There was a lot less instrumentation going on and stuff, but we re-recorded the album. And then Sinead got pregnant. And so it was decided that everything would be moved back, like release-wise and everything would be moved back so that she could have the baby and then they could launch her career sort of thing properly. And so during that time we weren't working, to begin with anyway. And then I got an offer to go to Australia and play with the band in Australia. But before we left, we did do an Old Grey Whistle test with U2 live in Belfast. And that was just me, Sinead, and Spike, the bass player. And we also played at a Japan fanzine convention thing, just me and Sinead playing, which was fun. I have to say that playing with Sinead was a wonderful experience. She was an absolute joy to work with, never a problem. Loved her to death. We all did. We all loved her to death.
Yeah. Yes.
And those early songs were really great.
Well, those that particular, those two first albums were like, when you look at the 80s albums that everyone had, Troy and I Want Your Hands on Me are stunning.
Yeah.
Stunning.
A lot of those original, I have recordings from the early tapes. Troy was like this huge epic had guitar solos, it had horns, it had everything in it. It's quite interesting. And we did a cover of The Crystal Ship by The Doors.
Oh, wow.
Which came out really well. And one day it has to see the light of day, has to be heard somewhere.
Yes.
But I do understand there's going to be a deluxe edition of The Lion and Cobra next year. So,
and that will be with you on it.
Yeah.
Right. So when the album comes out, is it you playing on that album, or was that the re-recorded album?
Well, I'm on the re-recorded album. I'm on everything except Just Call Me Joe.
Right.
Which was added later.
Yes.
Sinead had this love affair with this band called Max, which Marco was involved in. And John, the drummer, he was also involved in Max too. And Yeah, we all had the cassette of the Max album, and we all loved it. Nothing happened.
Yes.
Absolutely nothing happened. Um, but I guess Just Call Me Joe was from that, I think.
Yes. Because was Kevin Mooney involved in the production as well? And he'd been in Adamant, hadn't he?
Version.
Yes. I know. My God, that was quite a time in your life, really, wasn't it? The late 80s with Sinead.
Yeah, yeah. And then I
Okay.
moved to Australia.
Oh, Australia again. Well, not again.
Again, it was like, I didn't even know this band. They wanted me to come and, play some gigs, whatever. And I was like, well, when do you get the opportunity to go to Australia?
Right. Is this the slow clubs?
Well, that came later because when I moved to Australia, I gigged with this band, and then I got a publishing company interested in my songs, and so they signed me worldwide in Australia, and it was decided to create a band around my material. And so that's how the Slow Club came into being.
Right. And
And
that
so
was
basically it was myself and the drummer who I'd, shared a flat with in England, but he was Australian. And then we found a singer and we became a three-piece.
and that was when you released, that was the World of Wonders.
Yeah. And
Right.
that to me was a very important record to me because again, it was there were a lot of the acoustic influences in it. There's acoustic guitars on everything, and there's fiddles and mandolins and stuff. And I co-produced the album with a good friend of mine, John Jacobs, who was he engineered a lot of Paul McCartney stuff in the 80s.
Right.
But he worked on Japan stuff, which is how I got to know him. And then when it was decided to do the album, I suggested that he come to co-produce it with me, so we did it together. So like all the arrangements and stuff are my ideas, but all the production stuff was him.
Amazing. And then how come that project doesn't continue? Did you?
Okay, but there's always something. We played a lot. We toured a lot. We did a tour with Steve Winwood in Australia, and can you hear the rain?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty loud. I'll close the door. I don't think it'll make much difference, but
No, but it's very happening out there. Oh, there you go. Yes, as we say. Yes. So yes, that project. How come there wasn't a second album?
No. Well, what happened was we toured a lot. I mean, there are always places to play in Australia. That was the music scene in Australia was fantastic. There were bands playing all the time. It was a very, very, very alive scene. And I was there for almost 4 years, I think.
Right.
And I was on a work visa. And it got renewed every 6 months.
Yes.
And then they got to a point where they said they wouldn't renew it anymore. I had to leave the country and reapply. So I went back to England.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how long this would take, so everything was put on hold. And I didn't know what to do really, except I wanted to travel. I wanted to see somewhere else. So I decided to go to Peru and Bolivia for 5 weeks,
Yeah.
touring around, going to the Amazon, you know, and it was an epiphany for me, seeing the wild in Peru and Bolivia. I just somehow I was in my element. And when I got back to England after that trip, all I could think about was seeing more of Latin America.
Right.
And so I called the band and said, I'm not coming back.
There you go.
I need to go off and do my thing.
Blimey. And was that your last musical project at that stage in your life?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, I did a couple of other small things, but yeah, I didn't really do much recording at all in the 90s.
Did you ever see any other members of of Japan at that stage? Had you ever bumped into them again?
Yeah, I mean, I went back to England in the 90s a couple of times, and we hung out a lot. And I did some recording with Mick and Steve and Rich at one point. Yeah, I mean, you know, we hung out.
Had they ever mentioned how it must have how it kind of ended for you at that stage, you know, in the early 80s? Did they ever?
We didn't really talk about that sort of thing, you know, water under the bridge, whatever it is, you know.
Yes.
It's not really their fault anyway.
No, it wasn't. I just wondered if anybody just said, oh, just had any feelings or reflections on it.
Well, no, we never really talked about it. And, you know, I mean, to a certain extent, they were pretty disillusioned by that point too.
Yes.
You know, getting on with their own things and ignoring what the other guy was doing.
Yes, I know. It's a tricky one. So then when you had that epiphany in Latin America, is this when you leave the UK for good?
Yes. It was weird. I decided to go traveling. I didn't know. It was kind of like open-ended. I didn't know what was going to happen. I decided to travel through Latin America. I started in LA, hanging out with my friends, and then, you know, went across the border into Mexico, and then traveled through Mexico and Guatemala and Belize and Honduras and Nicaragua, and then I got to Costa Rica, and this was about the 6-month mark, I think.
Right.
And I stayed in these little wooden cabins on the beach in this place called Montezuma on the Pacific coast. You know, jungle all around, monkeys in the trees, no electricity, very basic. What toilet outside, you know.
Yes.
And the woman who owned these cabins, her name was Karen Monson, and she and her husband, they were Danish, and she and her husband had been the founders of the first national park in Costa Rica in the 60s. And we just had a rapport. We'd sit and chat for hours, you know, just about life and everything. And she knew that I didn't really have a plan. And she said, well, how would you feel about helping me run my cabinas? You know, I'll give you a place to stay. I'll pay you, you know. How would you like to do that? And I was totally in love with the place anyway.
Yes.
So I said, yes. And so I stayed in this place, Montezuma, working with her for like the first year. And then I stayed there for like 9 years. And during that time, I got into birds, and I also got into painting. And so just serendipity, really. I started painting birds, and somebody saw it who was making fold-out guides of wildlife of Costa Rica and stuff. Asked me
Yes.
if I'd like to do some of it, and I said, "Yeah, I'll give it a go." And then that led to doing field guides, and I'm still painting field guides for birds of Latin America.
Blimey. So did you have a skill for painting and drawing at this stage?
Well, I mean, I did it at level at school.
Yes.
I wasn't painting birds, but the two passions came together.
Yes. Well, absolutely. My God. And you managed to sort of have a new career.
That's my career, basically. That's
That
what I
is
do.
the birds of Costa Rica, a field guide, and then the birds of
I've done Nicaragua, I've done Panama, I've done Northern Central America. Yeah. And we're doing the third edition of the Birds of Costa Rica now. We're on the third edition.
God, it's a beautiful thing to do. My God. There you go. But then you've done a few other little musical solo projects, haven't you?
Yes. Yes.
So did this kind of light of day, was this the first thing you'd done for quite a long period of time?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it started off, the singer, this guy Isaac Maraca, he wanted me to produce an album for him, and I said I would do it, but I didn't know if I had the commitment or not, whether I would actually do it or not.
yes.
And he kept like badgering me about it. And I said, okay, and I decided, okay, I better do this, So we started working together, and it came to be evident pretty quickly that it was not going to be like a solo project. It was going to be our project, because I was heavily involved in the creation and the arrangements.
Yes.
Everything, and the production, of course. And so, yeah, it became our project. And we did it in 2 stages. We did like first 6 tracks, I think. And then we had several months off, and then we went back and did the next part. But each time it was not really planned out. It was all done at the spur of the moment.
Blimey.
Which I loved. I love that sort of creative buzz of just, going in. It's like, well, what are we going to do today? I have no idea, but let's do it, And that's what we did. The whole thing was done that way. And the tracks were created organically.
Oh my God.
And I don't feel it's an album of songs. It's an album of pieces of music which just happen to have vocals in them.
Yes.
And they take their own journeys. They kind of evolve, change, metamorphose into something else, and then go somewhere else.
God,
It was just, I mean, doing it was a really great experience. I don't think I'll be able to do it again.
No. But then you did another project, didn't you, with Martin?
Yes, and that was really done. I've never met Martin, he lives in the States. But these days that's not a problem, is it?
No.
I basically created some, guitar soundscapes and sent them to him, and then he put them together.
And have you got a studio where you are in Costa Rica, or do you?
It's basically, my laptop and speakers.
Because actually, the album you did with Isaac,
I did that in studios in San Jose. That was
right, okay, that did sound.
If I was to do a proper album again, I would definitely want to do it in the studio. I wouldn't want to do it at home.
Yes.
The idea is pretty creative at home, but
to finish it.
But I also, as I said to you, I really like the idea of coming in fresh with no ideas and just going for it.
So is it a case that you still play quite a bit around the house?
Feel like it.
Yeah. Yes. That's amazing. Yes. And then you did this other song, I Don't Believe in You, your tribute to...
song.
Pardon?
It's a Talk song.
Yes, a tribute to Talk.
Yeah. I've always maintained that if you're to do a cover of something, it shouldn't sound like the original. I don't see the point of copying somebody's version of it. It's like Tomorrow Never Knows. You put your own spin on it, your own ideas coming in, stuff. The melody might be the same, but you're basically changing everything else.
Yes.
And the way I feel about covers, I feel you need to take it somewhere that the original artist didn't think of.
I know. I do love the work of Livebark for that reason. When they ever do a cover of anybody, it's so different and yet quite...
Well, Japan's covers were always very different too.
Yes.
We always put our own spin on covers too.
Which I think is, like you said, you might as well listen to the original if it's not going to be any different. But it's just sometimes interesting when people pull a song apart and put a different emphasis on some of the lyrics.
Definitely.
Yes.
And so we might do more of those, maybe.
Well, yes, it's always that thing. So you got this kind of Vivabeat coming out, and you've got your illustrations. What else have you got lined up for the next 12 months?
Well, putting the third edition of the book together is the main focus in the next few months. That's going to be, taking up all my time.
Yes.
Getting it in book form, because it's quite different to the first and second editions. We've changed a lot. And then I don't know, I haven't got any plans really, but everything falls into place somehow.
Well, absolutely. And are you still as in love with Costa Rica as you were at the beginning?
It's home. It's I mean, I've actually lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else.
Right.
I've been here 34 years now.
That's quite yes. There you go. Do you have quite a nice community there?
Yeah. It's very pleasant. I live up in the cloud forest. So it's very lush and green and not tremendously hot. It's rainy season tends to be a bit cooler anyway in general.
Yes.
But it's a very pleasant climate. Suits me fine.
And the health, and is it okay on health as we all get a bit older, living in?
Yeah.
That's the main thing, isn't it? Looking after our bodies as we get to that age.
I'm doing okay. I'm 70 now, so.
This is true.
Whatever that means.
Yes, I know. We just have to take it one day at a time, really, don't we?
Yeah, and that's all I can do, really.
Yes. Well, look.
Dog, I had a cat, but she died last year. But I'm very much a cat person.
Yes. Well, we are very cat people, and the obsession with our cats is always quite high. But you can't beat a friendship of an animal, really, can you?
No, definitely not.
You never have that conversation or feeling that you need space or you need to give each other a bit of a break or you have any issues in life, No bad words spoken. No, it's lovely. I think they changed my life when I got cats. So
yeah, me too.
It was like that was it.
Yeah,
It's
I
just-
mean, I've had cats almost all the time that I've been in Costa Rica
yes.
up until now. Now I don't have one.
Well, I'm sure one will find you soon.
That might change. Yeah.
That often happens.
Wondering if it was worth it at 70 to, bring a new one in. But I think it'll probably happen.
It will. Yes, I know. You just need to relax and let it happen. It'll be good. But look, Robert, thank you ever so much for your time. This has been amazing. And
I hope I've, put some interesting stuff in there.
well, no, I've been fascinating. So, no, it's been fantastic. So, look, thanks for your time. And I'll keep in touch with Randy, who I know is our go-between and our little chat. But look, thank you ever so much. It's been amazing. And yes, best of luck for your next book. And I'll look out for it. But anyway, look, take care. And yes, I hope the rainy season's not too bad.
Oh, it'll be fine. It's actually my favorite time of year.
Brilliant. Well, that's the main thing. Good. Okay, take care, Robert, and all the best. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.
And that, dear listener, is obviously the end of the conversation interview. That was me in conversation with Robert Dean, talking about his life in music, the early years, Japan, Vivabeat, Sinéad O'Connor, and much, much more. But this has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, all those social media platform sites are available. Just Google away. And all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. So do check them out. Have a great week. Stay safe.